welcome to The Explainer. So, have you ever found yourself sitting in the glow of your monitor, just scrolling endlessly on your phone, and then suddenly you just stop? You're absolutely mesmerized by a total stranger eating an enormous, almost cartoonish meal. It sounds kind of crazy, right? But it's this surreal, super visceral experience. And honestly, if you've done this, you're definitely not alone. Today, we're diving deep into a fascinating internet phenomenon that, well, it sounds totally bizarre when you say it out loud, but it has fundamentally shifted how millions of us interact with food, commerce, and even each other. We are looking at a literal empire built entirely on the act of eating. So the huge question driving our explainer today is simply this: why on earth do millions of people watch strangers eat? On the surface, it might just seem like another quirky internet trend, something mindless to pass the time while you eat your own lunch. But when you look at the research and the data, they tell a completely different story. It's actually this profound paradox. We're living in the most hyper-connected era in human history, right? Yet we're seeing millions of people literally seeking genuine emotional connection through the digital consumption of calories. It's a pretty striking reflection of modern society, economics, and human psychology. To really wrap our heads around this, we gotta define it first. We're talking, of course, about mukbang. It's actually a really clever mashup of two Korean words: moknin, which means eating, and bangsang, which translates to broadcast. But hey, do not think of broadcast in that polished, high-production TV sense. Back in the early days of the South Korean internet, these streams were intimate, raw, and totally unscripted, usually just taking place in cramped bedrooms and tiny apartments. What started out as this hyper-localized grassroots trend has seriously exploded into a multi-billion-view global industry. Here's how we're going to break this down today. First, we'll trace the origins of the eating broadcast. Then, we'll look at the rise of the digital meal mate. After that, we'll categorize the creators, the big fighters and calm eaters. Then we dive into the business of binging. And finally, we'll tackle the ethics, health, and backlash surrounding it all. All right, let's jump right into part one, the origins of the eating broadcast. To really see how this whole thing kicked off, we have to rewind a bit. Back in 2006, a South Korean live streaming platform called Africa TV launched. Now, this is absolutely crucial because Africa TV was pioneering live interactive streaming way before platforms like Twitch were even a blip on our radar in the West. It gave literally anyone with a webcam the power to broadcast their life. By 2008, the very first mukbang broadcasts started popping up on the platform. They were completely unfiltered and intensely interactive. Fast forward to 2010, and it had gained massive traction, totally planting the seeds for what would become an absolute global phenomenon that eventually conquered YouTube and TikTok. Which brings us to part two, the digital meal mates. So why did this blow up in South Korea specifically? Well, it really comes down to a massive cultural clash. Historically, traditional South Korean dining is deeply, inherently communal. Because rice is the staple food, this entire culture of shared side dishes, known as banchan, developed over centuries. You eat together, you share a large meal, you talk, and you just enjoy the emotional warmth of the table. But modern urban living has completely fractured that tradition. With some of the longest working hours in the developed world, combined with the rapid rise of solo living, that traditional shared table has been replaced by a much starker reality. Mostly a solitary bowl eaten in a quiet, empty apartment. And this shift didn't happen in a vacuum. It was heavily driven by some really harsh economic realities. There's a growing demographic of 20-somethings who often fall into the NEET category, that's not in education, employment, or training. Struggling to find stable careers after economic downturns, a lot of these young adults face this profound sense of isolation. They feel like they've been entirely left behind by the economy, sometimes even being referred to as the surplusage generation. If you're feeling that heavy psychological toll of unemployment or social isolation, watching a broadcast of someone eating provides this perfect zero-stakes social interaction. It costs literally nothing to do and takes absolutely zero social energy to participate. To put this into perspective, the scale of this isolation is just staggering. By 2015, there were 5.2 million single-person households in South Korea. That was 27% of all households in the entire country. Just imagine a hypothetical viewer for a second. They come home late after a grueling, unsuccessful job hunt. They walk into a dark, empty room. They just don't have the energy or the funds to go out with friends. So instead, they open their laptop, and boom, right there is a smiling host sitting at a table piled high with food, just waiting to eat dinner with them. For millions of people, mukbang serves exactly as that meal mate. It provides a virtual sense of companionship that tackles both physical hunger and a really deep, sentimental longing. Moving on to part three, big fighters and calm eaters. With millions of hungry, lonely viewers tuning in every single night, a hugely diverse cast of creators stepped up to the plate, and some very distinct typologies emerged. First up, you have the big food fighters. These are the creators leaning hard into absolute spectacle, pushing their physical limits by devouring insane challenges. We're talking like eating 100 pieces of sushi in a single sitting. It really appeals to our human fascination with the extreme. Then you've got the pretty boy or girl typology. Here the focus is way more on aesthetics, engaging conversation, and building parasocial relationships. The actual food kind of takes a back seat. And lastly, we have the calm eaters. These creators rely entirely on ASMR, autonomous sensory meridian response. They focus on hyper-amplified sounds of sizzling meat, crunching, and slurping. It's all about providing sensory grounding and stress relief for a super overwhelmed audience. Okay, let's look at part 4, the business of binging. As you might guess, all those millions of views eventually transformed into a massive economic engine. Let's trace how these creators actually monetize, starting with that original Africa TV model. So in step 1, a viewer tunes in and buys digital currency. They call them star balloons for about 10 cents each. In step 2, the viewer tips the host live, right during the broadcast. Now, why drop 10 cents? Well, because it gets your username read out loud by the host. You get a reaction. You feel seen and acknowledged in a crowded digital room. Then, in step 3, real money changes hands. The platform takes a 30 to 40% cut, and the host keeps the rest. Given the sheer volume of viewers seeking that validation every night, popular broadcasters can literally rake in thousands of dollars in a single evening just by eating their dinner. Of course, the business model evolved rapidly beyond just digital tips, transforming mukbang into an absolute juggernaut of modern food marketing. Top creators started securing massive brand sponsorships and product placements. They've single-handedly popularized certain delivery foods on a global scale. I mean, a single viral mukbang video can cause instant worldwide sellouts of specific instant noodle brands. Think about Samyang's ultra-spicy fire noodles. Creators literally cleared grocery store shelves from Seoul all the way to Los Angeles. Ultimately, mukbang became an integral part of the Hallyu wave, acting as this powerful cultural export that introduced global audiences to Korean cuisine and lifestyle in a highly visceral, super addictive format. And finally, let's explore part 5, ethics, health, and backlash. Naturally, an industry built around extreme consumption was bound to face some serious scrutiny, starting with deep sociological debates. Researchers studying pop culture noticed a deeply complex dynamic, especially regarding female broadcasters. On one hand, some critics argue the genre conforms to the male gaze, presenting women eating as a sort of eroticized voyeuristic spectacle. But on the flip side, research shows it heavily resists that very same gaze. Many argue it creates a fiercely empowering space where women take up space unapologetically, consume voraciously without an ounce of shame, and prioritize authentic community and personality over mere objectification. It is a really fascinating dichotomy of exploitation versus empowerment. Beyond the sociology, there are the very real physical and health concerns. Critics are quick to point out that mukbang fundamentally normalizes overconsumption and binge eating. The massive portions consumed for our entertainment run entirely contrary to modern nutritional advice, not to mention it highlights issues of immense food waste. It creates this strange cognitive dissonance, right? We're promoting extreme gluttony in an increasingly health-conscious world. This concern actually reached the highest levels of government. South Korea's Ministry of Health and Welfare previously attempted to implement national eating guidelines and even considered regulating mukbang broadcasts entirely. They feared the streams were directly promoting unhealthy habits and driving up obesity rates. However, the public pushback from creators and their fans was incredibly fierce. But the backlash definitely wasn't isolated to just Korea. The format adapted to new cultures and absolutely exploded globally, especially in China, where the equivalent of mukbang is known as chibo. The scale over there is honestly difficult to even comprehend. We are talking about a staggering 24.8 billion views racked up for Chibo content on Douyin, which is the Chinese version of TikTok. The trend grew so unbelievably massive and promoted such extreme levels of consumption that it set the stage for a severe, top-down government intervention that would alter the internet landscape overnight. In stark contrast to South Korea's grassroots debates, the Chinese government launched an aggressive Clean Plates campaign directly aimed at combating food waste. President Xi prioritized national food security, and that led to swift and severe crackdowns. The Guangdong province even took the extraordinary step of making binge-eating videos completely illegal. Social media platforms fell in line instantly, erasing Big Stomach King creators' livelihoods practically overnight. Entire channels were just deleted. Today, if you search for these terms on Chinese platforms, you won't find the videos. Instead, you're simply met with warning messages urging users to refuse waste and eat responsibly. Well, we've traced an incredible journey today. We saw how mukbang emerged from the lonely, quiet apartments of Seoul to become a digital meal mate for an entire isolated generation. We watched it evolve into a multi-billion-dollar economic force capable of emptying grocery store shelves all over the world. And we explored how its extreme nature eventually triggered everything from feminist sociological debates to outright government bans. It definitely leaves us with a lot to digest. But ultimately, when we look at the millions of people eagerly tuning in to watch strangers eat dinner every single night, we have to ask ourselves, is digital companionship a cure for modern isolation, or is it just a symptom of it?